Hey, tomorrow night at 5:30 at the World Chess Hall of Fame in the Central West End is where you'll find our next guest. He is president and founder of Americans for Tax Reform, Grover Norquist. Welcome back to the Big 550 KTRS here in St. Louis.
Absolutely. Good to be with you on the radio and looking forward to seeing people tomorrow at the Chess Museum.
Let's talk a little current news first. Eric Cantor is the story of the day that he lost this David Bratt. Do you know that David Bratt was supposed to meet with you in Washington, D.C. and canceled because he had to grade papers?
Well, actually, we did meet earlier in the year. We run the center-right meeting, and candidates come by, 150 people. One day he was scheduled to come. It got in the newspapers, which is unusual for our meeting. It's sort of off the record. And that day he didn't come, and he said he had a class or things to grade. So I guess what that shows is it was a little bit of a race, not a lot of money being spent, not a lot of staff. He didn't have a lot of free time. He had a day job. And I think people are going to be studying this race for quite some time because the incumbent had done a perfectly adequate job, but had clearly irritated people in his own district. He's just an hour and a half down the road from D.C. So unlike other congressmen, where sometimes they can be out of touch because they live in California or Alaska and they spend a lot of time in D.C. and not in their state, you don't have that problem with a Virginia politician. So it's going to be very interesting when they do the autopsy.
Eric Cantor was a House Majority Leader. Some people are saying there was no right of Eric Cantor, and this guy, David Bratt, found it. What are your thoughts as you watch this morning?
Well, I think it's interesting. He had brought up that Bratt, the reason for running a while ago was Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, a sense of Washington out of control. Look, Washington is out of control. The difficult thing for a Republican congressman is people mad at Washington because the Democratic Senate won't pass bills that the Republican House has passed and that the president would veto bills that the Republican House has passed. The only person they have nearby to throw a rock at is their Republican congressman. And I'm not sure that that's actually a useful way to spend one's time. We need a different Senate and a different president. I'm all in favor of trading up the more conservative politician to replace a less conservative one if the district will carry it. I think that from everything I hear that Bratt should be fine in the general election.
Grover Norquist is going to be in town tomorrow night for a bit of a fundraiser for the Show Me Institute. 5:30 for a reception, and tickets are $35. You can get that at showmeinstitute.org. Grover Norquist, you're one of the few people who will come on the show and out the Bush administration during the Bush administration for their over-the-top spending.
Well, that was, one of the precursors of the Tea Party was this growth in spending. I run Americans for Tax Reform. We do the no tax increase pledge. For 25 years, we've gone to elected officials say, please, if you want to make it clear to your voters that you will never raise their taxes, sign the Taxpayer Protection Pledge. 95% of Republican House and Senate and presidential guys now do so. And as long as the Republicans have the House, the Senate, or the presidency, we haven't seen taxes increase since 1990. So we now have a Republican Party that will not raise your taxes. Important first step. George W. Bush never raised taxes. But that's not the full story. That's half of it. Don't raise taxes, step one. Step two, stop spending so much money. Reform government so that we can do the necessary things in government at less cost. And Bush got part one, never raised taxes, never focused on part two. It was not on the list of things that he was working on. And whenever there was a crisis, whether it was September 11 or the flooding in Louisiana or the financial scandal of Enron, the answer to every one of those came out of the Democrat Party's playbook. Oh, let's spend more money on it. That's how we do this thing. And every crisis became a bigger government. TARP, 800, $700 billion of giveaways was the response to the financial crisis, not reforming Freddie and Fannie Mac, which created it. That's one of the things Bratt was talking about in his race. But instead bailing everybody out so that you didn't have to reform anything.
Yeah.
So the Tea Party came into being as a reaction to overspending. It had creeped up during the not didn't explode, but it creeped up during the Bush years, and it was always going in the wrong direction, even if slowly. Then Obama comes in with a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, and President Obama, and goes $800 billion stimulus, $1 trillion increase in domestic discretionary spending in his 10-year budget, or just $1 billion up. Add to that what you knew was coming on the 20 taxes and spending of Obamacare and the massive regulatory cost added to the banks and investment. And then you had the second half of TARP. I mean, Bush had only spent half of TARP. The second half of TARP was spent by Obama, the TARP bank bailout. All of that tsunami of spending scared the bejesus out of people. And the Tea Party were people who hadn't been politically active, who said, my goodness, this is important, I need to get politically active. And you saw a drive to get rid of earmarks, which is very important, because congressmen busy getting earmarks cannot be focused on cutting the whole spending, okay? If everybody in the store is shoplifting, nobody notices that somebody stole in the cash register. You've got to have people not doing the little overspending if you want to focus on stopping the significant, massive overspending. And so Bush needs to take his responsibility, and the Republican Congress, and the voters who let them do it, okay? Somebody who's 50 years old and just realized in 2009 that the federal government was spending too much money was not paying attention. And now, we shouldn't have to spend all our time micromanaging the government. That's what representatives are supposed to be for. But we need to spend more than we have. And so I think we've made some real progress in 2010. You saw massive shifts, not just in Washington, but in the states. And that's why I'm so excited to come to Missouri, because now we have a Republican House, and until we get a Republican Senate and President, nothing happens in D.C. Nothing. Don't get frustrated by that. Be kind of happy. The first 2 years of United Democratic government was no fun. Stopping bad stuff is step one. But we can't do significant reforms until you have a different president and a different Senate in D.C. But in the 50 states, there are a number of states. There are 24 states that have a Republican governor and a Republican legislature. Missouri has both houses Republican, but a Democrat governor. But because you had 2/3 Republican in the legislature, you were able to cut taxes for broad-based income tax reduction, first time in 100 years.
Grover, we're going to leave you there because we want you to leave some of the powder in the gun for tomorrow night. How about that?
Oh, absolutely.
There you go. Grover Norquist, he's the president and founder of Americans for Tax Reform, and he's speaking here in St. Louis tomorrow night, the World Chess Hall of Fame. 5:30, reception at 5:30. The presentation starts at 6:15. Grover, safe travels, and we'll see you tomorrow night.
Looking forward to it. Take care.
You got it. 7:58 here, Big 550.